Your house has a number. You have never questioned this. Nobody has. The number is on your mailbox, on your door, on every legal document you have ever signed. It is so ordinary, so universal, so obviously necessary that asking why it exists feels like asking why the sky is blue. But here is what I need you to consider. For most of human history, houses did not have numbers. People did not live at addresses. They lived at places. The baker's house. The house by the elm tree. The stone cottage past the mill bridge. For thousands of years, that was sufficient. Everyone knew where everyone lived, because everyone knew everyone. Then, in a remarkably short window of time, governments across the Western world decided that every structure needed a number. And the reason was not mail delivery. Mail delivery came later. The reason was something else entirely. Something that once you understand, you cannot look at your own front door the same way again. I found this while researching tax records from the 1790s, trying to understand how the early American government identified property before standardized addresses existed. The answer led me to Napoleon, to the Habsburg Empire, to a man named Count von Zinzendorf, and to a system of control so elegant that it made itself invisible within a single generation. Let me tell you how people found each other before house numbers, because understanding what existed before tells you what the numbers replaced. In medieval and early modern Europe, location was relational, not numerical. You did not live at 47 High Street. You lived at the sign of the Red Lion, or in the house that belonged to Thomas the Cooper, or 3 doors past the well on the north side of the church. Addresses were descriptions, not codes. They assumed that the person reading them had local knowledge, knew the town, knew the landmarks, knew the families. This system was not primitive. It was communal. It functioned because communities were legible to themselves. The baker knew where the blacksmith lived. The priest knew every household in the parish. The magistrate knew every property owner by name. No external system was needed because the internal knowledge was complete. Historians of urban life call this the regime of familiarity. Anton Tantner, an Austrian historian who has written the most comprehensive academic study of house numbering, describes the pre-number world as one in which spatial orientation was embedded in social relationships. You found a house by knowing the people in it. The house had no identity independent of its inhabitants. This is important. Read that again. The house had no identity independent of its inhabitants. The building was not a unit in a grid. It was someone's home. It was known by who lived there, not by a number assigned from outside. And then, over the course of roughly 70 years, from the 1750s to the 1820s, that entire system was replaced across Europe and North America. Every house received a number. Every street received a name. Every city was converted into a grid of alphanumeric coordinates that could be read by a stranger who had never set foot in the town. The official history says this was about efficiency, about modernization, about postal services and fire departments and emergency response. And those justifications are real. They did follow. But they followed. They were not the cause. The cause was taxation. The cause was conscription. The cause was the state's need to see its citizens the way a farmer sees rows of crops, individually, countably, from above. The first systematic house numbering in history was ordered by Empress Maria Theresa of Austria in 1770. The context matters. Maria Theresa had just fought the 7 Years' War, one of the most expensive conflicts in European history. The Habsburg treasury was devastated. The army needed replenishment. The empire needed to know, with precision, how many men of military age lived in each district, in each town, on each street, in each house. The existing system, parish registers, local magistrate records, the informal knowledge networks of community life, was insufficient for this purpose. Parish priests could tell you who had been baptized, married, and buried. But they could not tell you, quickly and reliably, how many men between the ages of 17 and 40 lived in house number 23 on Herrengasse, because house number 23 did not exist. So Maria Theresa ordered the creation of what historians call the Seelenbeschreibung, literally the description of souls. Every house in the empire was to be assigned a number. The number was to be painted on the building in a visible location, and attached to each number would be a registry of inhabitants, name, age, sex, occupation, and military fitness. The houses were not numbered for the convenience of their inhabitants. The inhabitants were numbered through their houses. The house number was not an address. It was an index entry in a government database, written in paint on the wall of your home, visible to any passing official. The numbering was carried out by military conscription commissions, not postal workers, not urban planners. Soldiers went door to door, painted numbers, and recorded who lived inside. The resistance was immediate and widespread. In Bohemia, in Hungary, in the Austrian Netherlands, communities protested, painted over numbers, refused to cooperate. The numbering felt, to the people who experienced it, like what it was. Not modernization. Surveillance. Tantner documents that in some regions, the house numbers were understood by the population as brands, the same word used for the marks burned into the hides of livestock. The state was marking its property. The property was not the buildings. The property was the people inside. Within 2 decades, the system had spread across the Habsburg Empire. Within 50 years, it had been adopted by France, by Prussia, by the German states, by the Italian states, by Britain, and by the newly independent United States. Each nation provided its own justification. Fire response, postal delivery, census efficiency, urban planning. And each justification was true as far as it went. But the origin, the reason the system was invented, the problem it was designed to solve, was not service. It was legibility. The state needed to read its population the way you read a spreadsheet, row by row, column by column, number by number. Napoleon perfected what Maria Theresa invented. In 1805, Napoleon ordered the comprehensive renumbering of Paris. The system he implemented is, with minor modifications, the system still used in most Western cities today. Odd numbers on one side of the street, even numbers on the other. Numbers ascending from the point closest to the Seine. But Napoleon did not renumber Paris for the mail. He renumbered Paris for the police. The Napoleonic system was designed in direct coordination with the prefect of police and the administrators responsible for military conscription. The 1805 decree explicitly connected house numbering to the census, to tax collection, and to the identification of citizens for military service. Each numbered house was a node in a network of state knowledge. The number allowed the state to locate any individual, at any time, by reference to a coordinate rather than a relationship. Before the number, finding a person required asking another person. It required social knowledge. It required navigating a web of community relationships. The baker knows where the blacksmith lives. The blacksmith knows where the widow Martin rents a room. The widow Martin can direct you to the man you are looking for. This web of knowledge was, in effect, a form of community privacy. The state could not bypass the community to reach the individual. It had to go through the community. The house number eliminated that dependency. With a number, a stranger, a tax collector, a conscription officer, a police agent could locate any individual without asking anyone, without knowing anyone, without engaging with the community at all. The number made the community unnecessary as an intermediary between the state and the citizen. This is what James Scott, the political scientist at Yale, calls legibility in his book, Seeing Like a State. The house number did not help citizens find each other. Citizens already knew where each other lived. The house number helped the state find citizens. It converted an organic, relationship-based spatial order into an abstract, numerical, state-readable grid. And the genius of the system, the reason it became invisible within a generation, is that it was genuinely useful. Once house numbers existed, mail delivery became possible. Fire departments could respond to specific addresses. Ambulances could be directed precisely. The utility was real. And the utility made the surveillance disappear. Nobody questions house numbers because house numbers are helpful. The help obscures the origin. But the origin is still there, painted on your door. A system designed by a military empire to count its conscripts, perfected by a dictator to enable his police, and adopted so universally that asking why it exists sounds like the question of a lunatic. The United States adopted house numbering later than Europe, and the process reveals the same pattern from a different angle. In colonial America, the pre-number system persisted longer than in Europe. Towns were small, communities were tight. The relational address, the house by the blacksmith, the farm past the second creek, was sufficient. The early republic had no standing army that needed conscripts and no centralized police that needed to locate individuals. The two primary reasons for European numbering did not apply. The first American house numbering appeared in Philadelphia in the 1780s, introduced by a postmaster seeking to rationalize mail delivery. It was voluntary. It was inconsistent. Some streets were numbered, others were not. Many residents ignored it. The real push came in the 1790s. In 1798, Congress passed the federal property tax, sometimes called the direct tax of 1798, to fund a potential war with France. It was the first federal tax on property in American history. And to administer it, the government needed something it had never needed before, a comprehensive list of every building in the country and its assessed value. Tax assessors were sent into every district. They recorded every structure. They described every property. And where properties did not have numbers, the assessors assigned them, not for the convenience of the residents, but for the legibility of the tax rolls. The 1798 tax assessment is one of the earliest comprehensive property records in American history. It survives in fragments in the National Archives, and it reveals something striking. The assessors did not simply number houses. They described them. Dimensions, materials, number of windows, number of stories. They were measuring the buildings the way you measure livestock, by observable characteristics, for the purpose of valuation. The window detail matters. In 1696, England had introduced the window tax, a tax on the number of windows in a building, used as a proxy for wealth. The more windows, the richer the occupant, the higher the tax. This is why, if you visit old buildings in England, you can still see bricked-up windows. Homeowners literally sealed their windows to reduce their tax burden. They chose darkness over taxation. The architecture still carries the scar. The United States never adopted a window tax, but the 1798 assessors counted windows anyway. The measurement was in the system's DNA. Once you number the houses, you can measure the houses. Once you measure the houses, you can tax the houses. Once you tax the houses, you can seize the houses. Each step follows from the first, and the first step is the number on the door. By the 1830s, house numbering was standard in every major American city. By the 1860s, it was universal, and by then, the census, which had been conducted since 1790, was organized not by community, not by parish, not by relationship, but by address. Enumerators walked numbered streets, knocked on numbered doors, and recorded the inhabitants of numbered houses in numbered order. The 1890 census, the most detailed ever conducted, the one that recorded every family on its own form, the one that was stored without backup for the first time in American history, the one that was destroyed by fire in 1921 and authorized for destruction in 1933, was organized entirely by house number. Each form began with the street address. The address was the key. The address was the anchor. Without it, the person inside was invisible to the state, and that is exactly what the house number was designed to prevent. Invisibility, the one condition the state cannot tolerate, the condition that the farm in Tennessee maintained for 12 years before the IRS found a way to make them legible, the condition that the Amish resist through religious exemption, the condition that existed as the default state of human habitation for every century of human history before the 1770s. You were not always an address. For most of history, you were a person who lived in a place that was known by the people around you. The number replaced the community's knowledge with the state's knowledge. And once the state's knowledge was in place, the community's knowledge became redundant. That is not progress. That is substitution. I need to pause here because I hear the reasonable objection. House numbers are useful. I use mine. Ambulances need them. Deliveries need them. The entire infrastructure of modern life depends on the ability to locate a specific building at a specific point in a grid. Arguing against house numbers is like arguing against wheels. The utility is too obvious to deny, and the objection is correct. I am not arguing against house numbers. I am not suggesting we rip them off our doors and return to the house by the elm tree. I am asking a different question. I am asking what was lost when they were installed. What form of community knowledge became unnecessary when the state could read every building from a list? What privacy disappeared when a stranger with a number could find you without asking your neighbors? What relationship between citizen and state changed when the state no longer needed the community to locate the individual? The numbers are useful. They are also the first layer of a system that includes property tax, census enumeration, zoning law, building code enforcement, and the entire apparatus by which the state monitors, measures, taxes, and ultimately controls the built environment. And every layer was added after the number. Every layer depends on the number. Remove the number and the layers collapse. The building becomes invisible to the state. The person inside becomes unreachable without community mediation. The tax assessor cannot find the property. The census enumerator cannot count the inhabitants. The entire infrastructure of state legibility begins with 4 digits painted on your door. I keep thinking about the people in Bohemia who painted over their house numbers in 1770. They understood, instinctively, what the numbers meant. Not mail delivery, not fire response, not urban planning. The numbers meant that the empire could see them, individually, countably, extractably. The numbers meant that a conscription officer could walk down their street with a list and know exactly which door to knock on. The numbers meant that the relationship between the individual and the state had fundamentally changed, from one mediated by community to one that was direct, numerical, and inescapable. They painted over the numbers. The empire painted them back within a generation. The resistance ended. Not because the people were defeated, but because the children grew up with the numbers already there. The numbers became ordinary. They became invisible. They became the kind of thing that no one questions, because questioning it sounds insane. That is the deepest form of control, not the kind you fight, the kind you forget was ever imposed. Your house has a number. My house has a number. Every house in the Western world has a number. And we think of these numbers the way we think of gravity, as a natural feature of the world, not as something that was designed, implemented, and enforced by states that needed to see their citizens clearly enough to tax them, conscript them, and find them when they failed to comply. The number is the beginning. The tax assessment follows. The census follows. The zoning code follows. The building permit follows. The property tax follows. The mortgage follows. The death pledge, secured against a structure that the state can locate by number, assess by measurement, and seize by legal process if the pledge is not honored. Every system I have investigated, the guild economies that were replaced, the community credit that was eliminated, the barter networks that were taxed out of existence, the census that was destroyed, the tally sticks that were burned, every one of them connects back to this. The states need to see, to count, to number, to make legible what was previously known only to the community that lived it. And it all begins with the number on your door, the number that you have never questioned, the number that was not assigned for your convenience, but for the convenience of every system that needs to find you. The tax collector, the census enumerator, the mortgage lender, the building inspector, the court that will process your foreclosure if you fail to pay the death pledge on the numbered structure at the numbered address on the numbered street in the numbered district of the state that can see you because 250 years ago, an empress needed to count her soldiers and a dictator needed to direct his police. You did not choose the number. You were not consulted. It was there when you arrived, painted on the door, ordinary as air, invisible as control always becomes when it has been in place long enough. The Bohemians painted over their numbers and the empire painted them back. Nobody paints over them anymore. Nobody even thinks to. And that is how you know the system won, not when they impose the number, when you forget it was imposed.